Hello and welcome to the Tallinn University Social Entrepreneurship podcast, where we spotlight inspiring stories of innovation and impact. I'm Katie, your host, and today we're diving into the journey of Anastasia Pjatakova, a student of the Social Entrepreneurship Master's Program, or as we call it, SEMA, at Tallinn University, and the founder of Unsume, a social enterprise aiming to reduce overconsumption by making repairs easier and more accessible. Unsume is on a mission to combat overconsumption by helping people repair their clothes, shoes, tech, and household items instead of throwing them away. A simple video upload is all it takes to get a repair solution, making sustainable living more convenient. Anastasia often participates in public speaking events on sustainable fashion and startup events, pushing Unsume forward in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Estonia. Today, we will talk about her journey, the challenges and wins of building a social enterprise, and also how the Social Entrepreneurship Master's Program is supporting her. So let's get started. Hello, Anastasia.
Hello.
I'm glad you are here, and I'm glad we are having this conversation with you. The first question I would like to ask is, what inspired you to start Unsume and to become a social entrepreneur? Was there a particular moment or experience that sparked this idea?
Yeah, so I think if I dial back far enough, it was approximately when I was about 15, 16 years old. At that point, I graduated 9th grade, and then I went into study in a college when I was 16, and I had ecology lectures. And that was an unexpected moment for me because I went to study design and art, and ecology, philosophy, and science classes were randomly dispersed throughout the curriculum. And I had such an inspiring teacher. She was freshly graduated from university herself. I think she was about 26, so my age now. And she was able to give us personal sustainability footprint tests. And by doing that test, you realized how many planets would we need if every single person had the same behavior as you. And I thought at that point that I was probably okay, coming from Estonia, a country where people are sort of mindful, everything is fine. I thought it would be fine. It would be one planet. So to my surprise, even though I did recycling, I tried to eat less meat and so on, it ended up being approximately 3 planets that we would need if everyone had my habits. So it was a bit of a wake-up call at that point. And from those ecology lectures, I was still into design. So my bachelor's degree is actually fashion design of all things. I went to study that because as a little girl, I was always interested in this creative process. And I thought this was such a beautiful profession. But then as I'm studying, I realized that it's one of the most polluting industries on this planet and that I cannot bring myself to even produce clothing. And I was trying to use secondhand materials, upcycled, deadstock fabric, and so on, and trying to be the best version of a designer, but still contributing to the waste. So after finishing my bachelor's degree, taking a couple of years to think about it and to readjust my lifestyle, I realized that I cannot contribute to the problem. I have to be part of the solution. And after graduating bachelor's, I worked at Bolt. I still work at Bolt. I'm a regional lead there. And in general, Bolt as a company they're providing mobility services and trying to make this planet for people instead of cars. So also very green mission. And being within that environment, in this kind of startup environment, which has become a big corporation, which still has their mission and is driven by the mission, I think all of those 3 experiences shaped my desire to be a social entrepreneur and also contribute to resolving the problem of landfill waste from textiles.
That's wonderful. And we also wanted to mention that Bolt, if listeners don't know, Bolt is was an Estonian startup. That is now a unicorn, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest companies in Estonia at the moment, right?
Yeah, it's about to go to IPO also, which means going publicly traded company, which can be bought stocks on stock platforms. So it is quite the direction that a little startup can become from a 19-year-old who was just walking to different taxi drivers on the street, asking them to do certain things to sign up to his platform. Yeah, that's how far it got. And that's also the ambition of Unsume eventually.
Can you walk us through how Unsume works from the moment the customer contacts you to receiving their repaired item? And I also wanted to ask, is it done through a website or you already have an app developed?
So right now it is a web solution which is mobile adjusted. So it is a website, but it is designed with mobile first as an intention, knowing that our users are people who are using their phone way more than their computer. So currently not yet an application, but eventually we would want to get to that point, similarly to how, for example, in Estonia, there is a clothing swap platform that is called Jaga. They are also now an application, but started off with a web platform, as far as I know. Currently, the way that we process orders is either happening through our landing page, which is the pre-MVP version of what we have before minimal viable product, and through our social media, so specifically on Instagram. The user messages us, lets us know what is their repair need, so sends a video of their broken item or pictures. We send it to providers, ask them, hey, look, can you repair this? Can you not repair this? And to the user, we return back with the approximate cost of what it would cost to them, what the repair would be. And we pick the item up with a courier or through a parcel machine if the user chooses, repair it, bring it back to them. And besides the final item that they receive, our users also get an impact graph. So the whole point is to show the user how impactful their decision to repair was. So instead of throwing this item out into regular garbage bins, because Estonian the recycling system is not yet on the level where it would recycle textiles, it is about to happen next year, but not yet there. So a person, would choose to repair their item, wear it for a longer period of time, and actually be a bit more mindful as a consumer instead of buying new items.
You mentioned you have suppliers, the people who execute the repair process. How do you ensure the quality in the repair process itself? And do you work with local artisans, service providers, or do you have employees?
Mm-hmm. So we don't have onboarded employees. That would be third-party providers, existing third-party providers that are currently in Estonia. So repair services, and specifically for textile repair, what is interesting is that a massive portion of them are actually not digitized. So you cannot find them online. You can only accidentally stumble upon them in your neighborhood and be surprised of the fact that they're actually there and you never heard of them. So that's what we're trying to do. We're onboarding people onto the platform to make them a bit more visible to the people, to have their traction increase. So currently, we have been working with 10 different providers across Tallinn who are already either visible online or in a location that is not very favorable. And at the moment, we're also building up that base of providers by going one-to-one, similarly to how Markus Velik, when he was 19, walking up to taxi drivers. This is my job right now, going into those repair stores that are around the corner randomly. And then I talk to them, suggest that, hey, look, this is a platform that I can offer you. And from their perspective, to be honest, I'm just the customer. I'm the person who, let's say, if I process somebody's order, right, and our courier delivers it to the provider, to them it's just a courier as a person asking to get an item repaired. So it's not them needing to be online, because the reason why they're not online right now is because they don't have the technical skills, potentially, to run a website, to understand how all of that works. So at the current stage, we're not planning to onboard them to force them into this digital environment, but we're planning to expand the opportunity for people to get their items repaired in a very lazy, easy, effortless solution.
Yeah, I wanted to ask how your social enterprise monetizes all those things, how you are going to generate the income.
We operate on a processing fee approach, so similarly to how Uber Eats or Bolt Food or any sort of delivery platforms operate right now. We take a percentage of each order as their order value with a minimum amount if the order value is too small. And then every time that we work with a parcel machine or a courier, of course, that portion gets covered by the user as well. So our earnings are quite minimal in that sense. For us to be able to get to profitability would have to be at scale. So at the current stage, our running costs are obviously higher than the earning costs, but at the moment we're building up that user base to be able to be profitable from those percentage of order value.
That sounds great. Do you see any shifts in the customer behavior in terms of if people are becoming more and more open to do repairing instead of replacing? Tossing item in the rubbish bin seems to be an easy solution, but it's devastating for the planet. So do you see any shifts in behaviors of customers?
Yes and no, I think would be my short answer, because in reality, according to research that I've done so far, there is a big intention to action gap. So people intend to be more sustainable, but don't take the necessary steps to be sustainable in every aspect of their life. Specifically, there is a research from United Nations Population Division that highlights this area, but also from my problem interviews when I was talking to my potential users before establishing the enterprise, I had statistics of about 57% of them wanting to be sustainable or knowing of the issue and having this desire to engage with more green behavior, and only 33% of them actively engaging in that. So there is the gap, and the gap root causes were highlighted to be the inconvenience of that you need to actually research something, so decision fatigue that comes on top of that, and the busy schedule because they would need to likely travel to some other part of town. And for Estonia, yes, Tallinn is super small, so it's uncomparable in volumes. But for a Tallinn person to go somewhere half an hour, it is inconceivably far. And of course, if we extrapolate that to bigger cities like Berlin, like London, or any other city that actually has distance, that would become even more challenging to get to that provider. So convenience is what we're tapping into, but in terms of user behavior shift, they are looking to be more sustainable. So we're hoping to tap exactly into that aspect.
Yes, thanks. Social enterprises often face funding challenges, especially in the beginning, in the starting phase. When you have to convince, maybe lots of investors to join in then and to invest. What's your approach to finding and securing funding for your social enterprise?
At the current moment, we started off with the most typical, the bootstrapping approach. So when establishing the company last year, I used up 2,500 of my own personal savings capital, which I've been saving, generally speaking, for the purpose of starting the business at some point. The second stage of that would be non-dilutive funding from the European Union grants. So at the moment, which is very happy news for me, is that with the European Union's directive for circular and sustainable textiles, there's a goal to get to very circular system with textile recycling by 2030. And with that goal, there are 9 different actions that they've listed that they're trying to tap into, 6 of which overlap with what we are doing. So there's hope that we will be able to actually receive grants from the European Union. And I'm working with the professor from our university to help me figure out how and to which one we should be applying. So that would be second step. And third step is for future consideration, of course, would be equity or any sort of revenue-based financing from different angel investors or potentially even venture capitalists, but that's obviously slightly later stages.
Yes. You also actively participate in startup and public speaking events, also as a part of your studies at the university. What has that experience been like for you? What are your main takeaways out of those events?
I think even starting from when the interest in sustainable fashion or circular economy began around the age of 16, but by the time I started my bachelor's degree, so 18, 19, I started being a public speaker on sustainable textiles and sustainable fashion because that was my main area of interest at the time. And luckily, usually how those events go, you go participate in one and then the next one happens and the next one happens just because of that community being quite niche and small and having the opportunities there. That was my introduction and my learning of breaking out of any sort of fears, perhaps speaking in front of hundreds of people, and basically a training for pitching in the future. I didn't treat it as that at the time, but having the ability to speak in front of 100 people without any nerves is very useful to break when you're young and then eventually build on top of it. Startup Day in Tartu, it's a very amazing convention that happens every year. It's where a lot of different investors and startups fly and then drive into Tartu because Tartu is the second biggest city in Tallinn. Purposefully, it's being driven away from the capital. And on that event, you get to open up your mind and hear a lot of stories of what to do and what not to do. Specifically this year, the focus was on figuring out the very sustainable from the ability to keep it longevity as the business, to not burn out, to not lose your mind, to not, break down as a founder. So that was a very useful skill to understand and learn before I get into that slump. And in terms of what's coming in the future, I, thanks to the startup event, got invited to participate as a public speaker on the topic of circularity within the textile sector because of Unsume in the Arctic Circular Economy Summit. So that is set to happen in autumn 2025. And right now we're in discussions. So, not on the short list yet, but that's in progress and potentially we'll be going there as well.
Yeah, it's great that you mentioned that one speaking opportunity often leads to another one and another one. Especially in the beginning, some people tend to shy away from these kind of opportunities. But even if it sometimes might feel embarrassing to speak in front of a lot of people, they have to be a bit more daring, I would say, in that journey and just do it. And another opportunity is gonna open up, especially as a student. Yes, as developing their own projects. Also wanted to ask that you have likely already done, as you mentioned, many pitches for potential investors for your social enterprise. What are the most important aspects you focus on to increase the chances of securing either funding or partnership?
Overall, there are quite a few different structures that are suggested when it comes to pitching. One of the main ones is following a pitch deck. You don't bring the pitch deck and usually click the slides, but preparing the pitch deck is very helpful because you learn the main things that the other party is actually interested in. So for anyone who is looking to do that or practice their pitching, definitely download a pitch deck and follow that because it covers the main topics. Of course, what you're doing, but starting out from, hey, this is my platform and that's what we're doing is not very useful because immediately a person is like, oh, okay, I don't need it. You first need to engage them in understanding why they do need it. So you outline the problem, you show the information and statistics that 92 million tons of waste are created in the European Union from clothing and textiles every single year. And that's the same amount that would fill this amount of territory or something, quite trying to quantify to a person and make any sort of emotional connection to it. So those were the main aspects that I was trying to cover every time I'm trying to present it to a person. But obviously it varies from who I talk to. If I'm doing FFF pitches, which is a category of funding that you're doing sometimes, but it's friends, family, and fools. So anyone who would be actually ready to back you up in the beginning stages, then you don't necessarily focus on the market opportunity is 45 million euros and the amount of people that we can tap into is this and this. You mostly focus on describing the problem and letting them understand that you can handle it. But versus talking to investors, of course, it will be a lot more numbers-based, a lot more statistics-based, and maybe projections of where you can get to. But in terms of a funny story, exactly from Startup Day that was happening just a few weeks back in Tartu, I had my first opportunity to pitch to an investor. Previously, any sort of pitching that I did was either for family, friends, and fools. So that was first time. And funnily enough, so it's a mingling event where everyone is supposed to pitch to the investors and investors are prepared for it. And there were approximately 30 different investors that you could talk to. So I walk around the room, everyone is busy. I'm researching them, Googling them on LinkedIn, because the main thing that you want to do is to not waste anybody's time or not even waste your time when the investor is not investing into the category of business that you are. For me, I am green tech, so I wouldn't talk to anybody who deals with deep tech or medical devices and so on. It would just be us wasting each other's time. So I found one investor who would be applicable to me. I stand in line for him, I start talking to him, and I realized that this is the only person in the room who has my competitors in his portfolio. So somehow, of course, if he's the only one that invests in green tech, the likelihood of that is higher. But it was just funny that the only and first person that I ever pitched to has my competitors. So of course, we cut the conversation short as soon as we realized that. And I didn't share any sort of internal secrets and how are we different from their platform so that they wouldn't steal our ideas, right? But it is good to know that there is funding for different companies that are doing something similar to us. And that competitor has 500,000 pre-seed funding. So the need and the validation of the idea is there. My goal right now is just to speed up the process, right? And to make sure that I capture my market share in Estonia and then move on further to the countries that could be a good market for me.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful, especially researching the investors well. It's such a great advice that anyone should take, because your ideal client is not everyone. Your ideal investor also is not everyone. You have to niche down and research them well. And that really helps in development of the business. Yeah. Speaking of that, what has been the biggest challenge so far in building Unsume, and how are you tackling it?
So because it is a social enterprise and my main goal from day one is not becoming a billionaire and on the cover of Forbes, it is giving as much impact to this planet, positive impact as possible. And my main stakeholder is this planet. I am tracking the impact of every single repair that we have. And this is super difficult, especially because there isn't a consensus amongst even researchers. What is correct? What is not correct to measure? Is this the regular, one pair of sneakers that is repaired? Is it 14 kilograms of CO2 or is it 20 kilograms of CO2? Because it can get super, super granular, because if you weigh the sneaker, you look at the material composition, is the synthetic, not synthetic material, and so on. You can spend hours on just one pair of sneakers to figure it out. And that's, of course, the time that we don't necessarily have now with the resources of 3 people in the team. So eventually we would really want to get to a point where we do have this very granular check. But at the moment, the impact tracking that I do is I assess the material composition of, let's say, a sneaker that we're taking as an example. I look at the synthetic materials. I look at whether or not there are different, metal components and so on. And I briefly note it down. And once it's repaired, I look into the research of different studies that have existed there. And right now I'm comparing them to each other because they can say different things about the same thing. And at the moment, taking an average from those. So impact tracking is extremely difficult. And I would love to onboard a team member who has a background in ecological studies or environmental studies, and to actually have them be a permanent member of the team, because from day one, impact tracking is important for us. It will remain as such. So if anybody is listening to this podcast that actually has a friend or is that friend, please reach out to us and we would happily have a discussion about the onboarding process potentially.
What's been your most proudest moment with Unsume so far?
Well,
it's developing it.
Yeah, it's stemming from that biggest challenge, which is impact tracking, right? So even though it is impossibly difficult, it is still the proudest part because that's the core reason why Unsume was even founded. For us, from the first, we've completed so far 9 repairs, but have been able to summarize and track information for 7 of them because the last 2 were very recent. And with those 7 repairs, we have been able to save 1,100 euros to our users. So how we calculated that is if they had to replace the item, how much the same item would have costed them. We've saved 10,000 liters of water, which is equivalent to 52 baths that you can take. And that's quite a bit considering the amount of weeks in a year. And we've saved the CO2, so carbon emissions, the same amount as 2 trees would be processing for a whole year. So these are reference points that I'm bringing up because in our impact tracking also, we don't just tell you, 52 kilograms of CO2. You usually get some sort of reference point and understanding, 2 trees working for a whole year, I understand that better than some amount of kilograms of CO2. So that's been the proudest moment because it's just 7 repairs. And this gives us a picture of how much we can do if we actually scale and increase our production and increase our repair processing.
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful, that you are so thoughtful about the impact that you are making and the solution that you are suggesting them, because it feels more real, like more true, because you have so many nuances out there and you are happy to talk about it and to share either with your investors, potential investors and clients.
Thank you.
What advice would you give to students or aspiring social entrepreneurs who want to launch their own impact-driven business? And what are the most important things they should be focusing on?
Mm-hmm. I think my main advice would be for any sort of project that a person is interested in is to stop talking about it and do it. It will never be perfect. The plan will never be ready. The plan will never have everything that you're looking at. And even if it does, let's imagine that one unicorn person who has perfect plan. Once you start, you will probably make a bunch of changes. So there's no point in sitting on this idea forever and just sitting and waiting until somebody else starts it. And then you're like, they stole my idea. They didn't. It was just time for this idea to come out and you waited on it for too long. So definitely starting and making those mistakes from the get-go, because I thought of this for about a year before joining my master's program. And the reason why I joined the master's program is because I wanted to learn the tools for building it. But to be honest, anyone can start as soon as the idea comes out and make their mistakes and get their bruises and scab their knees in the process. But that's the whole point, because that's how we learn and how we improve and develop. And those mistakes are actually helping us grow a lot faster. So not waiting for too long, but also once you start, be open to feedback and be open to sharing it with people. Because working in the silence is equivalent to you just not starting the project for a really long time. Feedback is extremely crucial, and being able to hear that feedback from the critical point, which is your potential customer, is the most important. You may be starting with idea number 1 and you talk to a person. One person says, maybe I need slightly different idea. You're like, okay, cool. Maybe not time to pivot yet, but have a critical mass of people who you talk to. And then you realize that, okay, maybe my idea is nice and all, but it's not necessary for the people. So how can I shift it a little bit so that it's useful and my impact is actually bigger? Because the original idea might be cool, but not necessary for society as much as the other one.
Yes. Since you mentioned Social Entrepreneurship Master's Program, I'm going to ask, how is the Social Entrepreneurship Master's Program at Tallinn University supporting you in developing any particular courses or projects that have helped you?
Yes, definitely. So far, there have been quite a few courses, the ones that are in the program itself and some electives that I randomly decided to choose that helped me. But the 2 main courses from SEMA program that I found extremely useful were in the first semester, business model development course. So it is a very standard traditional way of developing your business in a very fast and iterative environment. So that's exactly where I learned to talk to my customers and listen to them and make the changes to my process. And that includes a lot of different things, but very important one, business model canvas, which helps you understand, does the idea make sense? Do the people care about it? Maybe it's time to change your mind. And the canvas is basically bullying you into understanding that this idea should change or it shouldn't, which is nice. And it also kind of forces you to leave the building and actually talk to people. So that's the part where if you're introverted or if you don't like talking to people, maybe start with like acquaintances or friends, but eventually break out of that shell and talk to strangers. And it's fine. People are not that scary. So that's very, very useful to have those conversations. And that's what we learned from business model development course. And the other one from this semester, which is currently ongoing, it is social capital and impact tracking. So that's, again, tapping into exactly what I care about and what I need for my personal business and understanding how to track all of my impact, learning the tools, learning the measurements, but also learning how to talk to our stakeholders, because to different stakeholders, you would talk in a very, very different way. So if I were to present my impact even to my users, to my social media followers on Unsume, on Instagram, please, unsume.eu, we would speak with graphs and maybe findings and funny stories and maybe interviewing people on the street or interviewing our users to share this personal information and then giving them data, right, on the amount of repairs that we did. To European Union on our grant application, we wouldn't be necessarily adding those personal stories, but would be quite heavy on data and very specific on the references that we use and the studies that we use. So it's all about the matter of presentation of data to the relevant stakeholder and obviously tracking it appropriately so that it's actually credible.
That's great. How can our listeners support Unsume or get involved?
Definitely check out our Instagram. I think that's the easiest, even if you're not located in Tallinn or not located in Estonia altogether. Who's to say that we're not going to be in your country in the next year? Because we're trying to grow very fast and have as much impact on our platform and on this planet as we can. So definitely check out Instagram, engage with our content, leave your feedback. There are going to be polls also. Sometimes we do them, so engage with those. And of course, if you want to keep track of our progress, so you can join the newsletter on our website. It's unsume.eu. Instagram is also unsume.eu. And Unsume, the name, right, is like unconsume. So we don't consume, we unsume and become an unsumer today as well.
That's wonderful. Anastasia, many thanks for your time and for sharing your incredible journey with us. If you would like to learn more about Unsume or to get your favorite items repaired instead of replacing them, visit their website and social pages that we're going to link below. If you're thinking about starting your social enterprise, remember that Social Entrepreneurship Master's Program at Tallinn University is the perfect environment to turn your ideas into action. With academic support and hands-on learning and a thriving community of changemakers, your impact-driven journey can start right there. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to share it with your friends. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.